Always a good time talking college football with Zach Smith. You can catch him on Menace to Sports. Look it up on your favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube, Menace to Sports. Zach, what's going on today?
Not a whole lot, man. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
No doubt. Appreciate you being here. You coached in the SEC, coached in the Big Ten. Okay. They are the two power brokers in the sport. Sorry, Big 12 fans, Pac-12 fans, ACC fans, the most rear ends in the seats, TV ratings, whatever measurement you want to go by, it's the SEC and the Big Ten. They are two definitely different cultures. And Urban Meyer, obviously, your boss, coached as a head coach and won national championships in both leagues and maybe changed the landscape of the Big Ten and some of the mindsets in the Big Ten. Kind of compare the football both on the field and the environment off the field in both conferences, and maybe some of the stereotypes and whether they really exist.
I mean, it's a different beast in the South. It really is. And, there's no one in the northern or Midwest, let's say the Midwest region of the country, that has as many great players and great teams collegiately, high school, you name it, as the Southeast. It's just not even close. And so you start with the fact that your recruiting base, you're recruiting the more great players. I won't say better players, because you go to Ohio, there's some great players in Ohio, but the problem is there's 5, right? In Florida, there's 25, right? Louisiana, 20. Georgia, 25. I mean, there's just so many more great players down there that, I mean, it's literally just like fishing in the sea like crazy. And so when you're recruiting down there, I mean, just naturally, most of those kids are going to stay close to home. Some of them get away. And so just the talent pool is so much greater in the South that really in the North and the Midwest, there's only one team that has recruited well enough that has a roster that can compete at an SEC level right now, and that is Ohio State. Every now and then another team will flash. Notre Dame will flash. Michigan will flash. Maybe Penn State flashes. But there's not consistently 3-4 teams that are in that conversation. And it really comes from mostly bigger athletes that can move, right? The receivers at Michigan can all run. They can all run like the receivers at, Georgia. But when you get down to linebackers, D tackles, guards, those kids that down in the Southeast just move way better. They're twitchier. They snap into people harder. And that's where the real difference is, that and depth. So, I mean, I could talk about the differences forever, Mark, but that's the biggest difference, right? And then you look at the Big Ten and the SEC. I mean, I think there's really conversations about, how close is the Big Ten, and it's yearly. One year there's a pretty big gap. The next year that gap's not so big, right? Like I think last year the gap was smaller than it's been in a while. And I always lump Notre Dame into the Big Ten. I know they're not in it, but they're right there in Indiana, so they're in the Midwest footprint, really. And so I think it's. I don't want to say the gap's closing, but I think it was smaller than normal last year.
And this has been going on for decades because obviously there's been a population shift from the north to the south and west. Hasn't really helped the Pac-12, but it's gone south and it's gone west. And so in a sense, the Big Ten, you got to give the league credit for keeping up to a certain extent, maybe not necessarily on the field, but again, in the TV ratings and in the stadiums, but it seems like it's kind of a losing battle. What can the conference do to try to keep up?
Well, it's just going to start with the commitment, right? Especially with NIL now, it's the financial commitment, right? You cannot not try to go higher up. You look at what happened with Lincoln Riley, what happened with Brian Kelly, like those coaches, those big name coaches that got bought basically, right, for $100 million. That's what the world, the world of Michigan and the world of Penn State, like they need a coach like that will go out, that will the NIL slush funds have to grow. They got to be able to go recruit. I mean, they got to win recruiting battles against Southeastern teams. And that's what Ohio State's doing. No one else is doing it. I mean, Notre Dame has a niche, right? They can go get a high academic kid that, great family. And that kid's like, you know what? I see the value in the Notre Dame brand, but that is few and far between. Most kids want to win. They want to hear NFL. They want to get developed. And there's just not a lot of programs in the Midwest that are really doing it. I mean, you look at what Mel Tucker's doing at Michigan State. I think he's the best thing to happen to the Midwest. going through he's attacking it like an NFL GM, going through the transfer portal, like, and what he's doing in recruiting, kind of the images he's putting out, the brand that he's creating. That's what the Southeast has been doing. And we all know this, right? I've talked about it on my show. You definitely know this, being in sports as long as you have. The Southeast has been playing by different rules in recruiting forever. And when I got to Ohio State, it was like, all right, go beat Alabama, but you can't cheat. And it's like, okay, that sounds fun. Like, that sounds fair. Like, tie my hands behind my back and get in a fist fight. So now it's all legal. So the Midwest, the Big Ten, they really need to develop that, I guess, that identity through the boosters, through the fundraising, that they can go buy players too, right? They can offer the same check that Alabama or Texas A&M can.
Zach, you mentioned the name Lincoln Riley. So I want to go two different directions here. The first one would be Lincoln Riley comes to mind, and Ryan Day, in a sense that they are both in a situation taking Riley back to his Oklahoma days, where they inherited pretty much, they got the keys to the Jag. They inherited everything, the recruiting, the resources, the money, everything was in place, 2 elite programs, and they've just kept them moving along. As opposed to a lot of guys that we could go across the country and say, well, not a lot of guys, but the Dabo Sweeneys and the Nick Sabans, to say, we can see that they could go anywhere and build a program that wasn't top 5, top 10 in the nation. So now Lincoln Riley goes to a place where you can win. There's no question about that, but it's still, man, they were 4-8 last year with one of the worst defenses in the country. So there's a lot of work to be done there. Do you give those guys, I don't want to say little less credit, because they, if you want to use Jim Harbaugh's phrase, started on third base, but that's the way it's been.
Yeah, it is. But I think success, like, let's say 4-year success, right? That's still impressive. I don't care, because there's been numbers of programs that have been taken over by coaches that woke up on third base and they just dismantled the program or just failed miserably at keeping it status quo. I think Lincoln Riley kept it status quo, maybe enhanced it a little bit. I think Ryan Day has enhanced the Buckeyes. Obviously needs that championship to validate that conversation. But I think that's a huge win, is just maintaining success, because so many programs have fallen off when a guy retires or, a guy resigns or gets fired or whatever. So, I mean, you definitely, what Lincoln Riley is going to prove himself now, right? He was able to turn it up a little in Oklahoma. If he can bring USC back, I mean, he solidifies himself as one of the top head coaches in the country. Ryan needs to win a national championship for that to happen. But I think what they've done on the recruiting trail, Ryan's been to the playoffs several times, been in the national championship game. You gotta, I guess, celebrate those successes, because there's been so many examples of guys that have screwed it up.
Zach, when you look at Lincoln Riley and, he goes to USC, and let's say he fulfills everything that we think that he can do. He brings USC back to national prominence, contending for college football playoff appearances, owning the Pac-12. I'm asking you the impossible question, but does the rest of the Pac-12 respond to that? Or does he just beat them into the ground and just own that league? Or do you see enough fight, enough commitment, to use your word, out there on the West Coast, that they'll respond much like Urban Meyer joining the Big Ten and some of the programs responding?
Well, there's 3 programs that I look at that I think will turn it up a notch, right? One is Oregon. They have the ultimate blank check from Phil Knight. There's no way that they're going to just let Lincoln Riley and USC take over the conference. And Kyle Whittingham at Utah is the other one. I mean, they've never needed to go sign 5 stars or have a blank check. They develop guys. They're tough. It's a different culture there. And that's why they win the Pac-12, right? So I think Utah will always be a contender. And then Chip Kelly at UCLA, they're going to have to do something, because they're right down the road, right? So those are the 3 teams that I think will need to level up. Utah being the one that just needs to keep doing what they do, right? It's their program is all about great defense, toughness, tackling, fundamentals. And if they don't change that, they're always going to be a tough team to beat. I don't care who you are. And so that's really where I see it at. Now, I think the Pac-12, you're going to need somebody to step up and be that Joker to Batman, right? And I don't know who that is right now. Probably Oregon with NIL deals and Nike. They would be the most logical candidate, right? But I think you're going to need that. Or what USC becomes Clemson of the ACC, right? Where Florida State was there for a minute, Jimbo left, and then Clemson just ruled the roost in the ACC. No one even could touch them. So maybe that's what happens if Oregon can't get there, with Utah being that kind of, alternate team that could give them a game.
Zach Smith joining us as he always does from Menace to Sports. Uploads every day. Please check it out, menacetosports.com right there. Zach, Miami, unlike any other program in the country, just kind of interesting that their success sits in about 20 years, and they've been irrelevant on the field since. For 20 years, they've been irrelevant, and they were a wasteland before they became what some people would say a microwave dynasty. Yeah. But they're intriguing right now. For me, take Mark Richt and that hire out of the equation, because I think unfortunately, it's shown that he has health issues, that he made a bad coaching hire with his son and kind of got married to that situation, because he obviously achieved well at Georgia and at a perennial top 10 program. But other than that, every coach that they've hired since Butch Davis did not succeed before Miami or after Miami. So they almost validated their bad coaching hires because nobody did anything anywhere else. Now they finally got a coach in Mario Cristobal who has shown, at least in a 3 to 4 year span, that he can win, get to the Rose Bowl, get to a Fiesta Bowl, win Pac-12 championships. And now he comes to Miami. Do you see that as a possible sleeping giant?
I absolutely do. I mean, going back to how was Miami when they were the U, right? I mean, it was cocaine, hookers, all of that. And not that they need to get back to that, but now they have NIL. It's all that money, South Beach lifestyle. And for a long time in the coaching industry, back to when Randy Shannon was there, Al Golden was there. I mean, I was out on the road recruiting, and I was down there recruiting South Florida, and everyone talked about someday Mario will be that guy at Miami. I mean, going back 10 years, back when he was at FIU, then when he was at Alabama, it was just always just kind of known that Mario will be the guy one day at Miami. It will happen. He is just the king of South Beach down there. In recruiting, he was great when he was at Alabama, getting Amari Cooper and players out of South Florida. People just always felt that way. I always felt that way when I talked to him or was around him. I was like, this guy feels like a South Florida guy, right? And now that he's there, some of the coaching hires he's made with the NIL stuff that they're going to be able to do down there, I think that coupled with the fact that Clemson's down and the ACC's awful, this is their chance, right? If Miami has a chance to come back to relevancy, they need to throw every haymaker they have right now to take that top spot in the ACC back and try to build Miami back to that legacy that was the U.
And with his ties to the West Coast, there are a lot of athletes out there that we're hearing, hey, they might be coming to Miami because they got attached to Mario Cristobal. I just was doing some work for Michigan football and looking at some of their recruiting prospects. They've got a 4-star offensive tackle that they're looking at, but one of his top 5, he's from Missouri, is Mario Cristobal, Miami.
Well, he's been at some places that recruit really well, right? Anyone that worked for Nick Saban has the blueprint to recruit at a high level. And if you've ever been to South Beach, I mean, how could a kid, you got an easy flight to Miami to get there, Fort Lauderdale, if you don't want to go into that atrocious airport in Miami. And it is absolutely breathtaking. Everything down there. Who wouldn't want to play there if you're going to be competitive on a national stage? They really should be the destination. I mean, you could say LA, but LA that's a rough campus at USC, right in the middle of the hood. It's not a great city to live in, and it's not great traffic-wise, financially, everything. I mean, I think Miami, if done right, it's hard to imagine a better destination than that place.
Coach Zach Smith, that's where you catch him on Twitter, Menace to Sports. Upload every day. It's a tremendous listen, so catch it, Menace to Sports, right here on YouTube or on your favorite audio platform. Zach, this is a role that we just started hearing about, I would say, in the last 10 years. And you can give us better insight into this. What is an analyst? We hear this all the time. Okay, this guy's not going to be on the field as a coach. He's an analyst. And sometimes we're talking about some pretty, well-traveled, good resume guys that maybe need a bit of a bounce back, and suddenly they're an analyst at a place like Alabama. What are these guys? And I'm sure the role changes from school to school, but to a certain extent, give us an idea of what these guys are doing.
Well, there's a number of different things they can do, but what used to be GAs and interns and all these grunts that ran around like minions, right? They still have those, but those guys used to do all the work, right? Break down games. They would, bring you all the analytics, all the statistics, all the analysis, and then you just had to trust that they knew what they were talking about and did it right. Right. And I mean, I'll never forget, we had 1 year where our support staff wasn't as good as it always was. And literally all day Monday was spent, as you're studying the film, fixing the breakdown and making sure that the data in the computer is right. So when you run the third down statistics and you want to know what they do, you're not basing it off wrong information. And that's really, really important. So that's one role that an analyst will do is they'll kind of preview the film and make sure all the data is right. So you can save time for the full-time coaches to do their job, because that could take 2 hours to fix a breakdown. And that's 2 hours in a week that you don't have hours to find. And so that's one thing they can do. The other thing they can do is, which we didn't ever have before, is as you're going on in the season, like anyone, you have tendencies, right? You'll do things that you would like to do offensively, and defenses will pick up on that. And so we always had an analyst, a high-level analyst. Joker Phillips was one, right? When we were at Ohio State, where he would go in and study our offense and say, hey, listen, you got a bit of a problem here. Like every time the tight end is off the ball and the running back's on the opposite side, you only run 2 plays. And you're like, whoa, well, that's important to know. Like, because if the defense knows that, they'll just stop those 2 plays and that whole package is dead. So they'll give you insight into what you're doing subconsciously so that you can fix it, or you can use that information to your advantage, right? We only run 2 plays, so we'll run this play action off this one play, and they'll definitely fall for it because they've worked on that play all week, right? So they just give you more insight from a high-level coach that actually is competent. It's not some intern who's trying to learn the game. So it's really valuable. The more you have, the better.
Okay. Pretty much in line with what I thought, but I wanted to hear it from you to really clean it up and know what we're talking about here. Good stuff. Zach Smith, Menace to Sports. Catch him every day. Again, favorite audio platform or right here on YouTube. Zach, appreciate you stopping by as always, man.
Definitely. Always a good conversation, Mark. Thanks for having me.